A gun store in Washington state has found itself on the wrong end of the state's high-capacity mag ban and is being fined $3 million for an act of civil disobedience. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you're here, then I don't have to tell you that gun control laws are stupid and do nothing to actually curb violence. This is just as true for things like magazine bans, which are completely meaningless if someone is really intent on doing some hardcore damage. Mag bans have also been bounced back and forth in the courts, and no one can seem to decide whether or not they're actually constitutional. You and I know the answer to that, but we are not judges, are we? At least beyond the computer and YouTube screen. Now, there are a lot of people who suggest acts of civil disobedience when it comes to these laws, and after all, civil disobedience is an American tradition, and sometimes it really works out. For example, the mass noncompliance that we are seeing in Illinois and even saw in other states demanding people register their so-called assault weapons. But unfortunately, the number one thing to be aware of is that if you're doing this on your own, you need to be prepared in case consequences do come down. And apparently the best way to prepare for that is to have $3 million just laying around. Clearly, this is a case meant to discourage anyone else from doing it. But before we get into all of the details, here is a word about today's sponsor. If you've been a viewer on this channel for a while, you might remember that in June 2020, I was doxxed for my political views. Not only did I receive threats from BLM, but I also had people trying to get my livelihood taken away just because they didn't like my politics. Now, most folks won't have that crazy experience that I had, but that doesn't mean that your information is any more private. There are companies out there whose sole purpose is to crawl the internet and government records for your personal information and habits just to sell it to someone else. And that someone else could be anyone from a marketing company to someone looking to steal your identity. Or these days, it could even be a news outlet looking to punish you for owning guns. That is why I have partnered with a service called Delete Me to make sure that my personal information stays private. Delete Me works to remove your personal information from hundreds of data brokers and websites, and they continually search and delete that information if and when it pops up in new places. What's really crazy is that I actually purchased a similar service from a different company a few months ago who claimed to have scrubbed all of my data as recently as last month. And even after that, Delete Me found 122 pieces of my information across multiple websites. And they were able to remove me from 25 of those within 48 hours. I know this because they also give you a full report of every website searched, every site that had your information, what information the site had, and every site they're removing it from. And now, to help me bring you guys peace of mind, Delete Me is offering my viewers 20% off of their consumer plan using promo code LibertyDoll at my link, joindeleteme.com/LibertyDoll, which you can also find down in the description. So check them out today to get control over your information. Magazines holding more than 10 rounds have been illegal in Washington, unfortunately, since 2022. Yet, according to Attorney General Bob Ferguson, Mohammed Baghai, I'm gonna call him Mohammed going forward because I am sure I am butchering his name terribly. Anyways, Mohammed had continued to sell thousands of these magazines in his former shop, Federal Way Discount Guns. The state even filed a lawsuit against him for selling the mags, and he kept calm and carried on like a true American hero. According to Ferguson, Federal Way sold over 3,600 high-capacity magazines from July 1st, 2022 through December of that year, when the state sued him. Then he sold another 250 in January of 2023 until the state secured a preliminary injunction to stop him from selling the magazines. In April last year, a King County Superior Court judge ruled that Mohammed had indeed violated the state's Consumer Protection Act. He has since retired to Nevada and didn't fight any further, though the final consent decree didn't come in until last Tuesday. His is the first lawsuit the state filed to enforce the ban. The state has since brought suit against Gators Guns in Kelso, Washington. That case is ongoing, and the state went after a third company, WGS Guns, but in the end, they were only fined $15,000. Meanwhile, the law has faced several court challenges, all awaiting verdicts for various reasons. One is ongoing in the Eastern District of Washington and was filed by the Silent Majority Foundation. Another was filed by the Second Amendment Foundation in the Western District of Washington, which has been stayed while waiting for the results of Duncan v. Bonta. As I said, the $3 million agreement was just reached last week, with the state saying that $1 million will go to recouping their legal costs, while the other $2 will be given to law enforcement in the name of fighting gun violence. So for those of you in the back that might not be keeping up, that means that the state spent $1 million of your tax money to prosecute this guy for a law that is still in court and might be found unconstitutional. And if that happens, will he get his money back? Of course not. Ferguson says federal way discount guns chose to violate a critical law aimed at combating mass shootings. Washington businesses are following the law and stopped selling high-capacity magazines. This resolution provides accountability for someone who flagrantly violated the law and will increase law enforcement resources to combat gun violence. He went on to call the violations egregious and brazen. And yes, charging this guy $3 million totally gonna stop those mass shootings. Meanwhile, Mohammed claims that he wasn't violating the law all willy-nilly, but instead was listening to law enforcement who had told him the law was unconstitutional. And seeing as there are those 2 lawsuits against it, which have yet to be decided, that's not the worst argument. Whether or not those alleged law enforcement officers stepped forward to help him is at this time unknown. Would it have done any good? Probably not. There are some people who suggest that he wasn't fighting for the Second Amendment at all and just wanted to keep making money by selling the mags. And I mean, that is entirely possible. Maybe he's just covering his butt saying that it was civil disobedience. But in the end, does that really matter? It's still someone being prosecuted under an unjust law that is completely unconstitutional, goes against Bruin, and is costing $1 million in taxpayer money? And nonetheless, this is a good example of how laws still have consequences even when they're unconstitutional, because it takes a while to prove that through the courts. Meanwhile, people still fall victims to the whims of their legislators, which is what I say in every video where there's a law that is flagrantly unconstitutional but is being pushed forward anyways. Yes, the constitutionality of a law is ultimately what matters in the distant, big picture court future. But in the short term, someone saying that the law is unconstitutional clearly does nothing, because people are still being prosecuted under it to the tune of apparently anywhere from $15,000 to $3 million. I mean, that is life-changing bankruptcy money. The shop is now owned and run by Mohammed's son Andrew, and the shop's website features a give-send-go to help him fight the state and has raised almost $15,000 over the last few months. It's a great start, but a far, far cry from $3 million. Anyways, that is it for this video on the sad state of affairs up there in Washington state. You guys know the things for the video: like, share, subscribe if you're new here, ring the notification bell, and as always, thanks for tuning in and happy shooting.